Okay. Right. I am going to kick us off. Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. My name is David Yu. I am the Director of College Academic Counseling. We have our other counselors, Mrs. Ji Sun Kim, Mrs. Lisa Park, and Mrs. Cherie Schaefer-Noth joining us today, as well as our guest speaker, Dr. Stephen Antonoff. And so we're super excited to have him here. Before I introduce him, I'm going to just do a little bit of housekeeping, but also let me just start us off with a word of prayer. Father, we just want to thank you for your goodness, Lord, of accompanying our children during this time, during this journey. And we just pray, Lord, that you teach us as educators, as parents, how to be good stewards, Lord, how to be good stewards for our students during these times, Lord, and that even though college and the whole college process comes with a lot of outside noise, Lord, we just pray that our students can learn to lean on you during this time and to be able to follow your leading. We're so excited to have Dr. Antonoff here with us tonight. We just pray that you can be a part of our conversation and be a part of our meeting tonight. We thank you, Lord. We give the following time to you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so I know that tonight we open this up to all our high school families, but I do have just a couple things I want to announce specifically to our 11th grade families. Last week, our counselors went into all of our Bible 11 classes and reintroduced Naviance. And I say reintroduced because we've gone in 9th and in 10th grade to introduce them to Naviance. But this is going to be a tool that we're going to start using a lot more starting in 11th grade. And so we also passed to all of them a copy of Dr. Antonoff's college matchbook. It's a great workbook. It's a very easy read that will help them kind of get their feet wet in thinking about the whole college going process. And we have a couple of assignments for them. So one of them is an activity list that helps them to start thinking about the different activities that they participated in throughout their time here in high school, which, you know, it's put together in the format of the Common App. So it makes it a lot easier when students are applying to schools next year for them to just transition it over. The college matchbook, we have a couple of assignments for them there. On Naviance, we have a student survey that we're asking students to fill out as well. And so, and then for the parents, you might have gotten an email that came out last night from our college and academic counseling department that has a whole breakdown of everything that I'm talking about with much more details. But we plan on starting our 11th grade meetings in January. And so we're hoping that all of our students will have this taken care of before we start our initial meetings. And traditionally in the past, we had our junior meetings usually a little bit later, around March-ish, after course selection season. But I think right now we're in the thick of college application season. November 30th, we have our UC-CSU deadline. And what we've been seeing from a lot of our students is there's a lot more students applying early action this year. And so, you know, we wanted to respond to that by starting to have our 11th grade family meetings a little bit earlier too. So please encourage your students to complete the assignments. Everything's on Google Classroom. You can also see the slides that we presented in the classroom on Google Classroom. And then for parents, there's an instruction in the email on how to log into Naviance if it's your first time, and how to access your own Naviance account. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our college and academic counseling department for help. Okay. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight. We have Dr. Stephen Antonoff, who again is the author of the College Match book, but also College Finder, a very popular book for parents and for counselors and helping students finding the right fit. He was also the Dean of Admissions at the University of Denver. And so tonight specifically, we've submitted a couple of questions that we get from parents pretty often. And we're asking him to talk about what it means to find a great college and talk around the idea of it. So with that, I will pass the mic over to Dr. Antonoff. Sorry, one more thing before you hop in, Dr. Antonoff. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and so feel free to just type in your questions in the chat, and we'll have Dr. Antonoff answer them at the end of this presentation. Okay, Dr. Antonoff.
All right. Thank you very much, David, and thanks to the entire counseling team for including College Match in your curriculum and for inviting me to be with you tonight. It's a great honor. I have to say, however, that I miss being in Sunnyvale. I have been lucky enough to have come to the campus and been a part of this program there. So I miss seeing the faces directly and interacting directly. But we will do our best with this virtual format, as David indicated. I encourage you to submit questions, to engage in these discussions as much as you want to engage. I feel like the more engagement, the better, and the better I will feel about being able to be a part of your college planning. So. Thanks again for inviting me, and let's go to the first slide, David, which is the overview slide. The next slide. I just wanted to say a couple of general things about the process of college planning. And the first thing I wanted to say is that I encourage you to widen the net as much as you can as you think about developing a college list. I encourage you to apply to a place that perhaps you've never seen. Apply to a small school if you're thinking about a big school. If you are thinking about going to college to find a job, consider looking at a college that has a great liberal arts and sciences program. The point I want to make is that I feel like oftentimes in the college search, students and their parents to some extent don't look far enough. If they're only looking at Oregon and California and Washington and Colorado, let's say, widen that, because there are lots of interesting, fascinating colleges in different locales and different sizes and so forth. So be sure the net is wide enough. The second thing I wanted to say as a general overview is to recognize the opportunities available. One of the things that I have learned over the years is how many really great universities there are in this country. And I have to say, when I was way back, when I was a dean of admission at the University of Denver, I honestly felt like there were sort of a handful of really fine schools and a lot of others. And having spent 3 months a year now for almost 40 years visiting colleges, I realize the tremendous variety of schools and the tremendous quality of colleges. And I'm really just talking about the US. If we look beyond, clearly the resources multiply. So lots of wonderful choices, lots of interesting places with interesting students, with interesting faculty members, with interesting results of an education. So I encourage you, as part of widening the net, to recognize all of the opportunities that are out there, which leads me to my third and final overview point, which is that to find all of these colleges takes time and takes effort and takes a concerted effort. Um, so you need to be able to spend the time and to talk about options and to meet often, to use a lot of different resources. We'll talk about some of them tonight, but to take the time that it takes to make a good decision. We know that decisions like this, decisions that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the case of college, these are not easy decisions, and the value of really committing yourself to this task will pay off. Remember that there are 3 stages in college planning, and each one of them is important. The first stage is which colleges I'm going to consider. Um, in other words, which colleges are on your radar screen, which colleges you're going to investigate, which colleges you might visit, which colleges you might research. That's a critical part of this. The second stage is to determine which colleges you're going to apply to. And again, a critical decision that involves not only where you will get admitted, but also the fit of the college. And the third issue to be considered is obviously which college to attend. And I sometimes feel like that final stage doesn't get as much time. People feel like, let's say, if they get off the wait list, that's the definite school that they would go to, forgetting perhaps about all of the things that they've learned about themselves and learned about colleges through the process. So all 3 of those stages are really important. And I want to, in emphasizing the importance of spending time, I want to encourage you to separate the noise of college admission from the valid information that exists. And by noise in college admission, what I'm talking about is hearsay, maybe one person's opinion. I visited, I visited the University of Washington, and I didn't like it. Having spent 30 minutes on the campus, or something like that. That's really noise. There are always people that are going to like, whether it's a high school, whether it's a college, whether it's a car, whether it's a restaurant. We know, just as consumers, that there are lots of opinions. Each one of those opinions doesn't necessarily mean that that opinion is correct. The other major source of noise, I think, in college admission is college rankings, and particularly the US News ranking system. And do I look at the U.S. News? Yes, absolutely. I do, and I talk with families about it. But it's important to keep in mind that the rankings are one approach. They have determined how they are going to rank colleges. For example, they determine that 20% of the final ranking is peer assessments. In other words, the ranking of college presidents about other colleges and universities. I can tell you from my experience over these years, most college presidents don't know colleges very well. They know the name colleges, of course, and therefore the 20% of the ranking system that is based on peer assessments are oftentimes popularity contests, beauty contests. They don't know, the college presidents, that is, don't know the diamonds in the rough. They don't know the schools that are really coming onto themselves. They don't know which schools have happy students. And there is nothing in the US News ratings that evaluate happiness. There's nothing that evaluates whether anyone has learned anything on that campus. All of the criteria are based on class sizes and citations in publications and financial resources and first generation graduation rates. Again, all important factors, but realize that for your student, what US News feels is important may not be what is important to you. You want to be sure that your search is geared to what you want. I also want to highlight the valid information as opposed to the noise. And valid information is the counselors at your school, Mr. Yu, Miss Park, Miss Schaefer-Noth, who have I forgotten? Miss Kim, and probably I've forgotten others. These are people who are trained in college admission and can help with all three phases of the college planning process. In addition, you want to look at valid information that is available in guidebooks, talking with college admissions representatives, many of whom visit your school, looking at some of the books and some of the websites that are reliable, looking at some of the blogs that are available. These are sources of valid information, and these are the sources that you want to use as your primary ways to find out about colleges. Okay, with that as an overview, let me turn to some myths and misunderstandings and mistakes, and they're easy to make. And many people that are going through this process can be victims of accepting some of these myths and making some of these mistakes. The first myth I want to talk about is that the myth that schools that cost more are of higher quality. Obviously, there's a relationship between quality of academics and cost, but it's not true to say that if it costs more, it's a better school. That is not true for any number of reasons. We're going to talk about cost in a little while. But I do want to very clearly make the point that you shouldn't be fooled by a high price tag indicating quality. A mistake that is also common is falling for the marketing gimmicks and the traps that colleges are using. And I have every respect for admission officers. I was one myself. I have great friends who are college admissions officers, and they are working hard and trying their best. But their goal is to bring in applications, not necessarily applicants that fit. Their goal is to bring in applications and to bring in good applications. And good is in quotation marks because good is what a college thinks is good. Be sure that as you move through that you understand that colleges in fact are trying to get, if you're a parent, trying to get your student to make an application. If they've made an application, they're trying to get them to be really interested in that school. And even after acceptance, there are marketing gimmicks that colleges use. Some colleges send a note to every student who's accepted, a handwritten note, no doubt not written by the dean of admission who's signing the letter, but probably by a student in the office that would say something like, Bugsy, your essay was great, and we hope that you enroll. This is one of the ways that certain colleges have found to get more students that have been accepted to enroll. Another thing that I like to point out is the colleges that talk about like 100% of our students get into medical school. What does that even mean? Does that mean 100% of people that start as pre-meds get into medical school? I doubt it. Does it mean that all of the students who apply to medical school get in? Maybe. Or it could be the percent of students that are advised to apply immediately to medical school from undergraduate school. And that's the 100%. So am I saying that statistics and am I saying that information from colleges is not to be believed? No, I'm not saying that. Most is to be believed. What I am saying is be cautious and check the facts and check and ask what they're talking about if they say 100% of our students get into college. Another myth is that admission officers admit the most qualified students. you know, they don't necessarily admit the most qualified student. They admit the most qualified student to them. Meaning, if I'm looking for more tuba players, a tuba player is more qualified to me. If I'm looking for more students from New York State, then that is a more qualified student in the eyes of an admissions person. So um, uh, keep in mind that there are lots of goals that colleges have as they decide on who's going to be admitted and who's going to be denied. Keep those things in mind as you approach this process. Let me move on and talk on the next slide, please, about a self-assessment. And that's where the college process needs to begin. It's thinking about you as a student or you as the applicant. So many students are quick to brush over this part of the college search, and it is so important. Um, you know, each one of us as learners are different. Every student that's a straight A student is not the same student. Every student that gets a particular score on the SAT or the ACT is not the same student. So what I want to encourage tonight is that you think about yourself, if you're the student, as a learner, as a person. Are you practical? Are you a thinker? How are your academic skills? How is your writing? How are your verbal skills, your note-taking abilities? Are you a person who really loves learning? How do you handle pressure? For example, how would you handle getting a lower grade? Can you deal with that, or would that set you into a tizzy? Are you enthusiastic about a school in general? Is it easy for you to sit down and do your homework? Um, do you enjoy talking about intellectual things with your friends, books, and that sort of thing? College Match has a number of surveys, and I hope that you take them. Um, uh, they're in the book. They are also on my website. They're free. There's a self-survey which allows you to assess a lot of different qualities of yourself. There's a values assessment, which I find to be particularly helpful. There's an audit of college success traits. Um, and there's also a qualities worksheet to think about what you're looking for in a college. If you use the material from College Match, or you use other self-assessment techniques or assessments or surveys as provided by Naviance or provided by your counselors, great. Just be sure that you're doing enough self-assessing. The next slide, please, is looking at the ways of slicing and dicing colleges. And I'm not going to talk about all of the factors tonight. Hopefully, reading College Match, you'll get a better idea of some of these variables. But I do want to talk about a couple of ways that you can analyze a college. And One that is so broad that it's not on this particular slide is the cost of college. And that's important really for every family. It may be that you're going to be applying for need-based aid. It may be that you're just wanting to go to the best college for the best price. In either case, cost is a significant a significant factor. And remember that, as I have already mentioned, that there are value colleges. Just because they cost more, as I've said, does not mean that they're better. If you can find a great college that costs less, then you're a good consumer, and more power to you. Remember also that over 500 colleges these days provide merit scholarships, and merit scholarships are generally given to students not on the basis of their family need, but strictly on the basis of the college wanting them as a student on their campus. So it might be because they have very good grades or high test scores. Some colleges are giving merit scholarships on the basis of leadership and other variables. So keep that in mind as you are looking at colleges and universities. Consider how cost is going to play a role in your choice. And I encourage all parents to talk to their student about cost. No one, when they're, at least no one that I know, if they're buying a first car for their student, goes and says, look, you can buy anything and let me take you to the Lamborghini dealer and the Ferrari dealer. You can have anything you want in the world of cars. Most parents will not do that. And it's the same with college. So there ought to be some discussions. This is the limit. This is what we've saved. This is what we have. This is how we feel prestige fits into this. This is how we feel about an in-state option versus an out-of-state option. All of those things are very critical to consider as one is looking at size, looking at cost. In terms of size, I just want to say that there is a huge difference between a small high school or a small elementary school, or a small middle school, and a small college. It's a world of difference, and so realize that when you're looking at colleges, that it's hard until you visit, until you see, to really appreciate the great diversity that exists at a small college. In terms of location, the middle item on that slide, all I want to say about this is that you're not picking a vacation site. You know, yes, the weather is important, and yes, you're from a great weather state and a great part of the world, but college is different, and there are wonderful opportunities in on the East Coast and in the Midwest and in areas that don't have the kind of climate. Um, Many of those schools cost less. Many of those schools are easier to get into than you would expect. If I'm a school in San Diego, it's going to be particularly difficult to get in because everybody wants to go there. And the same is probably true in other parts of California and the West. Just be broad in thinking about location. And religious influence, the item on the right of that slide, the point I want to make about it is the difference between religious affiliation and religious influence. There are many schools that have a religious affiliation that are not particularly religious in the sense of required chapel or other religious requirements. So keep that in mind as you see that schools are Methodist affiliated or members of a particular group of Catholicism. The next slide is additional ways of looking at colleges. And what we're talking about here, the first on the left is majors and careers. And it's always hard for me to generalize about majors and careers because there are some students that are very determined. I mean, they've known forever that they want to be an engineer, and for those students, looking at engineering programs obviously is the right approach. On the other hand, the research indicates that there's only one chance in 10 that a person will be doing anything connected to their first major in college 10 years out. Therefore, I guess my advice here is follow the major if that's for sure, but be open to looking at other aspects of the college as you are also looking at the quality of the pre-med program or the quality of the engineering program. Also look at some of the other ways of slicing and dicing colleges. I'm always concerned that our society does not do a very good job of helping people with career decisions. So I encourage students to talk with their counselor, to take a career inventory as available, and to do some legwork yourself on careers. The web is filled with great information on careers. You know, if you Google, what do I do with a career in psychology? You will find a whole host of good information. If you're looking for new careers, do searches on what are some new careers, what are some ways of preparing for jobs in 2030 or 2040. I encourage every family to undertake that kind of searching themselves, because it can be very, very helpful. And then on the right side of that slide, the campus culture. In other words, what is the glue that binds a particular campus together? Is it beer, for example? Is it athletics? Is it intellectual conversation? Is it discussing famous works of literature on the weekends? Is it pranks? Is it fraternity and sorority life? And oftentimes there's not just one a factor that binds a campus together, but it's a investigation which is worth some time to talking to students on campus and really determining how important athletics are compared to clubs, how important fraternities and sororities are compared to religious organizations, how important academic organizations are compared to service organizations, and that sort of thing. And finally, the next slide, please, is looking at some other factors, and there's many other factors, and I will mention prestige here. It's perfectly fine for a great student to want a prestigious college. The problem I have found is that the number of prestigious colleges that most students have in their mind is too limited. Again, I can tell you from spending months and months on these campuses how many great colleges and universities there are in the US alone. Remember also that there is a difference. There's a relationship, but there is a difference between prestige and the quality of the undergraduate education. Let me repeat that. There is a relationship, but it's not always true that the most prestigious schools have a lock on quality of education. Lots of schools have quality education. Activities available, obviously, if there's a sport that you are interested in, if you're interested in environmental oriented clubs, theater, art, and so forth, those things ought to be considered. And then there are other factors, and I want to suggest looking at as many other factors as possible. Study abroad, learning resources, whether the school is a good preparation for the military, what the political atmosphere might be like. And in terms of other factors, I want to encourage you to think about the ways that you are going to be academically successful. Will you need study spaces? Will you need personal attention? Do you want or need help from other students? Do you want an atmosphere where you're pretty much head and shoulders above the other students? Or are you okay being in the middle of your class academically? And as you're thinking about other success factors academically, think about social, emotional factors that might yield success for you. Are you a person that really needs a lot of privacy or a lot of space? Are you a person who thrives in a musical scene, or a certain number of days of sunshine? Those kinds of things. And finally, and the next slide, please. Finally, as you are looking at these factors, determine what the anchor factors are and then what the variable factors are. In other words, what are the anchor factors? These are the factors that are the most important. Maybe it's cost, maybe it's academic major, maybe it's religious influence, maybe it's prestige. And if it is prestige, admit it, and be sure that you're not conflicting prestige with academic quality. And then the variable factors. These are the other factors, but don't just focus on the anchor factors. Even if major, let's say, and cost are the major anchor factors, the other factors ought to be considered. So the culture of the campus, the political atmosphere, where you're going to be successful academically, all of the other things that we have talked about, and all of the other things that are included on the qualities worksheet, which is in College Match, which gives you a good, I think, good overview of the factors that are important. So let's move on then to the next section. Let me just mention a few tips for finding great colleges. The first tip is to be your best self in high school. And my advice here is to push yourself, but to know your limits. Colleges are extremely interested in the level of courses that you've taken. So honors AP classes are significant, but know your limits and have a successful experience. I also encourage you, in terms of being your best self in high school, to be aware of the world around you. I think I think admission officers are attracted to students who know what's going on, who are aware of the of national, international issues, aware of local issues, school issues. And the third point that I want to make in terms of being your best self in high school is to be sure to do something productive with your time. Be sure that you are contributing in a significant way to your community, to your high school community, to your city community, that you are being productive in terms of your time. The second tip for finding great colleges is to allow yourself a little bit of confusion. As I say, the process of finding a college is can be tedious. There's lots of conflicting information out there. So don't be too hard on yourself if you are indecisive and you're confused. Use lots of different sources of information. The third tip here is, and the final tip is to keep optimistic. It's so easy, I think, for students and to some extent their parents to focus on the schools that a student probably won't get into and fretting about how horrible that situation is. Believe me, everyone should have reach colleges. Everyone ought to have schools that are potentially more difficult to get into. But don't just harp on those. Focus on, if you're a if you're a B student at TKA with, let's say, average scores, average recommendations, average activities, let's say out of 3,000 colleges, you could get into 2,800 of those. Again, a B student, average in every way, could probably get into 2,800 of the 3,000 four-year colleges in the United States. So focus as much as you can on all of those schools. Still try for the ones that are reaches. Still go for them. Do the best job you can in your application, but um, uh, keep optimistic. It's really important. So I want to, before we go to questions and answers, I want to again thank you for inviting me to be with you tonight. I hope that the comments that I made and the questions and answers that we'll have in a few minutes, I hope that that's helpful to you. I hope that the college match is helpful. There's a chapter in college match for parents. There's the first chapter in college match is also kind of a overview, and I think it can also be helpful to parents. So my wishes for your successful college planning. And again, my thanks to the counselors and the school for inviting me here tonight. So with that, let's go to some questions and answers. And David, I think what I will do is go to the questions that the counselors gave me. These I asked the counselors to help me a little bit and to ask me some questions that are frequently asked. So let me start with those, and then we can I can take other questions that I hope that you have. The first question. How do I find out how much a college costs? A wonderful, wonderful question. And my response to this is to keep your own list to compare one college from another, because colleges don't always have the same information on their website. Some colleges have extra fees. So what I suggest is that you keep your own list of what tuition is, what fees are, what the range of room and board, as opposed to the average on room and board costs, because room and board costs can vary tremendously. Books and supplies, transportation, all of the things that are important to you as a family, how much health insurance would be. I also encourage the use of net price calculators. Most colleges have net price calculators, which let you estimate how much the school is going to cost, and potentially how much financial aid you would consider. I also want to encourage you, as you are thinking about college costs, to consider summer work earnings and during the school year work earnings. There are many students who are supplementing their education costs, or at least paying for some of their incidental expenses through work. The second question is, once you know what you're looking for, where do you start to build your list? All right. So Once you know what you're looking for, once you have a pretty good idea of what those anchor factors are that we've just described, you start with schools on your radar screen. In other words, maybe it's the school that your parent or guardian attended. Maybe it's a school that an older brother or sister attended. Maybe it's a maybe it's San Jose State because that's a local backup for you, perhaps. So you start with some of those colleges, and you also add colleges that you've heard about or thought about. Maybe it's a college that you've gotten materials in the mail or gotten a text from. Then the next critical step is to talk with your TKA counselor. These are the people who know colleges best and who are most able to look at all of the schools. Mr. Yu was kind enough to send me a list of the tremendous number of different colleges that King's Academy students have applied to in recent years. It includes big schools, small schools, schools all over the world. So these counselors know who's gotten into those schools, who has not gotten into those schools, and more significantly, or as significantly, they know what schools would be a good fit for you. In addition to the counselors, I encourage you to look at the college websites. I also encourage you to look at websites like College Data that has good information about percent of students admitted, percent of students getting merit aid. I encourage you to use a guidebook like the Fisk Guide to Colleges. While there are certainly experts in college advising who disagree with Fisk on his description of particular schools, that's relatively rare. The general sense of what a school is like from reading the Fisk Guide to Colleges can be helpful, as well as some of the websites, College Vine, Appley, that used to be CapEx, all are good sources of information about building your list. The next question: how do we reduce the stress around the college admission process? Gosh, I wish I had a great answer to that. But I have a couple of thoughts that I hope that you will allow me to share. The first is that attitudes are contagious. And so I encourage everyone, as a way to deal with stress, to be as calm as you can as you move through the process. Take it one step at a time. If you're in the 9th grade or 10th grade, you have time to really think about all of the different steps. You might have time to do some career planning early on. And even if you're an 11th grader or 12th grade and making a choice of where to apply or possibly where to attend, still take those steps one at a time. You want to ask lots of questions. You want to celebrate achievements. Celebrate when you get your CSU applications out, when you get your UC applications out. Have a night on the town. Celebrate these steps along the way, which can reduce stress. The other thing I want to emphasize here is don't make the whole process about getting into a dream college. Again, I've said this, but I'm going to say it again. Go for the dream college if that's in the cards and that's what's best for you. But don't make the whole process about getting into that school or getting into one of 5 schools. Make it much broader than that. That in itself will, I feel, eliminate some of the stress. And toward the end of the questions, I have a question here, which is, how do we set appropriate expectations for the college list? Foundational, target, and safety. Well, I trust that this question is about, I'm going to answer it as I think it's about, and then whoever asked this can clarify it, and I in turn can clarify. But I sense this is about expectations of getting in. I feel like if a school accepts less than 20% of their applicants, that school is probably going to be a reach school or a more difficult school to get into for almost any student. Now, your counselors are going to be much more precise with this, and they're going to be able to say, here's what happened in the last couple of years with this applicant that had a GPA that's similar to yours, et cetera, et cetera. So use that guidance as your primary guidance. But generally, I feel like any school that's accepting a fifth of their students or less is probably a reach. As a matter of fact, I go a step further. I call the schools in the Ivy League Athletic Conference and the other uber competitive colleges, Stanford, MIT, and the very competitive 4-year institutions, Swarthmore, Pomona, Amherst, Williams, and so forth. I call them wild cards. And I call them wild cards, which is a level above a reach, because I feel like their decision-making is so completely unpredictable that it's beyond a reach. It's just a wild card. By the way, I like to say, instead of reach, I like to say low chance of admission college. And instead of instead of target or middle level, I like to say medium chance of admission. And then I like to say high chance of admission for backups. To me, the word the word backup sounds like a booby prize and sounds like why would I even want to go there? Some of my best, some of the students who I've worked with, some of their best choices, in other words, some of the choices that have worked the best for them have been from their backup list, from their high chance of admission list, because they were the very best fit for a particular student. So that's my answer to that. But again, if I'm not answering the question that was posed, ask again. And the final question that I have, and then we'll open it up, is what types of students or families should consider working with a private counselor? And I understand that your school and your department is fine with people working with outside counselors. Well, and I am a private counselor, so I say that before you hear my answer. I think the focus here is on two things: knowledge of your student, or knowledge of yourself if you're the student, and knowledge of colleges. No one will know, no independent consultant will know you as well as your school counselor. And that is a critical factor, because they know you from lots of different exposures to you. They may have seen you on the athletic field, or in a play, or in a leadership role in a club. Knowing those things about you is critical and very important to finding a good fit college. The other side is knowledge of colleges. Your counselors, again, are trained people. They are students of colleges, as I am a student of colleges. If you find that there's an independent counselor who is going to know you really well, is going to really get to know you, and knows colleges well, that might be something that you want to talk to your counselor about and say, I'm thinking of going to Mrs. Smith. What do you think? What is her reputation? How are you going to be able to work with her? Those are the kinds of things that I that I would ask and answer before seeking any sort of outside help. Hopefully that answers the questions, and I'm going to turn it. Let's see who's going to be.
Yeah, we have a couple questions that someone posted. One is, how can you find out about a school's culture before visiting in person?
Okay. Yeah. How do you find out about a culture before you visit? Not easy, but talking to your counselor as the first thing, and getting their feedback. They probably have talked with other students who've come back to school and given them some impressions of particular schools. So your counselor is a good source of information. Then I mentioned the Fisk Guide to Colleges, and I mention it again here. I think the best paragraphs in the Fisk guide, are paragraphs about the campus culture. In other words, what people do on weekends, what the popular clubs and activities. I find those paragraphs in Fisk more reliable than the paragraphs about the strength of academic programs. So using the Fisk guide. I've mentioned college data. I encourage you to use the data there. If you're looking at small liberal arts colleges, colleges that change lives, has some good descriptions of campus culture that I think are worthy of looking at. And then check out some of the large websites, Niche, College Vine, Appley, and also look on even YouTube. Look on YouTube under particular colleges and universities. In other words, do a Baylor search on YouTube and see what's there. You can oftentimes find some interesting elements of campus life. It's interesting. Some schools you see more theater performances on YouTube. Others you see more drunken brawls and so forth. So all of those sources, I think, would be ones that I would use.
Thank you for that. And also, you mentioned how you wouldn't use the Fisk guide for the type of education or the academics of a school. So one question was, how do you find out what a college's quality education, specifically with particular majors?
Yeah. Let me, as a person who, for one of my other books is College Finder, and College Finder is a book of lists of colleges in various categories. So there's a list of colleges that have great soccer programs, and there's a list of colleges that are good values, and there's a list of colleges for a flip-flop wearer, and things of that sort. And the most difficult part of that book is always the quality of the undergraduate programs, because there is very little reliable information about the quality of undergrad programs. And I can tell you that oftentimes what a college is selling as the best programs are not necessarily the best programs. They may be the programs that the college needs more students in. So what do you do? Well, for one thing, the more you can interact with students from that campus, I wouldn't hesitate to call if I was really interested in photography, and I was looking at a particular school's program in photography, I wouldn't hesitate to call the school, call that department, and ask to, well, you might see first if there's any photography clubs or organizations listed for that particular school on the web. Sometimes you will find a psychology department or a pre-med department of a college that will have a website or some club. So checking out the talking with a current student, clearly when you visit, going to a department and asking again to talk with a student, finding out about the good professors, the not so good professors, what the job prospects are for students who are graduating from that particular department. All can be good evidence of quality at a particular school. The admissions representatives also, you want to ask them specific questions. If they say that, that their pre-med program is so great, what do they mean by that? What is the evidence? What is the evidence for that? The last thing I want to say about quality of departments is this. I think it's relatively fair to say that the overall quality of the college is a significant factor in looking at many of the arts and sciences departments at a college. In other words, to try to determine whether the history department at Amherst is a good department or is a better department than the history department at Swarthmore may not be as valid as looking generally at the quality of the institution and making your choice on the basis of that. Again, I don't like to say what I just said, but because it's so hard to determine quality. Oh, one other thing. I said I was finished, and I have one other thing to say, and that's about pre-med. Colleges that have a pre-med major are no better than colleges that just have a strong chemistry program and a strong biology program. A college that has a nice brochure on pre-law is no better than a college that just has strong departments for someone who is thinking of preparing for law school. So keep those things in mind as you think about the quality of departments.
That's pretty much it that I see on our side. So I think unless there's any other questions that people want to throw into the Q&A. I think that's it.
Okay, all right. In the interest of time, I did respond to a couple of questions offline as well. I want to also respect Dr. Antonoff's time. He just flew in from Tampa and then hopped on this call to be with us today. So I'm sure he's
happy to be here.
We really appreciate you being here today. It was very helpful. Everyone, we will have this recording sent out over the next couple of days. Again, thank you guys all so much for spending your evening with us. And I hope everyone has a relaxing and wonderful Thanksgiving break. And again, once your students have completed the assignments, if you are a junior family, you can reach out to the counselors, and we will start our junior meetings in January. So thank you so much, Dr. Antonoff. Thank you, everyone else.
Thank you all. Thank you, counselors. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.